Welcome. My name is Jeremy Elledge, and I will be your presenter for our live Zoom training today. So I want to thank you guys for coming and being a part of our last live training for the first half of the year. So we appreciate you guys coming and getting your CEUs with us. It's a lovely Friday afternoon, so we hope that you're watching from a comfortable spot. So I'm always kind of curious to know where people are watching us from. So here in a second, I'm going to ask you guys to type in there at least where you're watching from, maybe in the state of Oklahoma. You don't have to tell us anything more specific than that, but we don't want to know anything. But anyway, my name is Jeremy Elledge, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And some of you guys know me and are familiar with some of the work that I do. And so if I haven't scared you off yet, I'm always thrilled at that. So thanks for coming back.
Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. All right, so we're reaching down in, past the Red River. So I think I know who that is. So welcome, a friend from down south. And so were there others? Are they shouting out now? Okay.
Tulsa.
Okay, Tulsa, T-Town. That's my kind of my hometown area. So I'm coming to you live from Norman today. So I'm a transplant from from up the turnpike. But today's training is called ICC for Healing and Hope. The cognitive challenge of changing your brain. And so, these presentations, they're often kind of spontaneous. I create a PowerPoint, which is kind of a loose structure that we're going to kind of discuss from today. So no one needs to be read a PowerPoint presentation, and so I'm not going to do that for you guys today. I'm guessing maybe we may have a couple of people that may have never heard me talk or present before, and if that is the case, I will share with you that I am vision impaired, so I cannot read to you my PowerPoints. I could turn my robot on the computer and it could read them to you, but that wouldn't be very much fun. So and like I said, I like to have live discussions, so if there's anything great about having a presenter with limited vision, is the fact that we're going to this will be kind of a spontaneous discussion, and hopefully my memory's up to par. So we will see. As always, I want to thank my bro, my friend, my staff person, my specialist here, Travis Kelly, for keeping me up and functional through these pandemic times, and helping you guys have access to our resource. He, for some of our recording stuff too, he even sometimes puts in cool little graphics or sound effects or whatever, and just makes us cool and fancy. So he just graduated from the University of Oklahoma. And we're very proud of Travis, and we're sad that he's probably going to go out there and get like a fancier job at some point and leave us. But we love you, bro. We appreciate you a lot. And you do good stuff for us. So Miss Martina, of course, always love you and appreciate you. Licensed clinical social worker and on-hand participant. And so appreciate your support, and appreciate you guys for supporting what we do. Everybody says, thank you guys. No, I mean, it really does. I think we're accomplishing something, because as far as the New View project, we're 4.5 years strong now. We're gaining in some of the momentum, and actually getting to do some of those things that we've been telling you guys that we were willing to do, as far as training schools and training police departments. And so we're getting to continue to do that. And we do ask again that if you have friends in the administration of law enforcement or school, education, we want to connect with those people, because New View is our is kind of our side gig, you know. In social work and counseling, many of us have second jobs, and so this is my second thing. I work for the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services full-time, and I'm a professional doer of the work, and that's something that I've said often, and I'm proud of that. That's why I say it often, because you know, I feel like sometimes you know, there's an old saying about people who can't do it teach it, but I do actually do it and teach it, and I think that helps keep what we're learning about relevant, because these kids, these patients, adults, adolescents, they teach us, don't they? And so I continue to do the work. I'm a full-time clinician, and I've done a lot of therapy this week. I am pleased to say and report that for those of you that tuned in last time, I haven't had any crises this morning to intervene in. It's been a pretty mellow morning, so it was a pretty frantic rush to get on camera last time. So, but it all worked out, and everyone ended up being safe, most importantly. So, so anyway, New View Healing Solutions is our organization. You're here so you know about us, but again, we're so glad to provide your CEUs. And help you get those continuing educations. We all got to check the box and meet those mandates, but we do want to provide training that's real. You know, we want it to be affordable and accessible, which again, we think we're continuing to improve our process at that. But we don't want to just help meet those mandates. We don't want to just help check those boxes. We want to help people, because you know, I think at times, we've all been to in-services before where you just did it to meet some kind of legal mandate or whatever, and it didn't make that time, you know, educational, informative, or real learning. And so we deal with work that saves people's lives, you know, and people that struggle with the issues that they come to us with sometimes lose their lives to those issues. And so anytime that we don't make educational opportunities real, we're letting our clinicians down, we're letting our patients down, we're letting our communities and our families down. And so I've been to some great training, and I've been to some that's really lacking. So I started this organization a few years ago, as you guys know, and I want to, help my colleagues and friends and contribute and share and learn with you guys. And so as always, we are looking for people to continue. Right before the pandemic, we had some folks that had helped us do some presenting, and we are still looking for people who have a passion and something to help trauma inform our state. Then we want to hear from you, and we'll pay you. You can come stand up here and do it, or we'll maybe even come to you if you're not real terribly far away, and we'll film you. But the point is, there's lots of great brains in Oklahoma, a lot of great strengths, and a lot of great injuries. Oklahoma is by many measures is high as number 1, perhaps number 3, you know, somewhere in the top 5 as far as ACEs and adverse childhood experiences. We're really high up there in a lot of those unhappy facts about people and injury. And so as an Okie, I'm embarrassed by that, and I know that a lot of my fellow Okies, my brothers and sisters out there, are agreeing with me. So I don't ever intend to preach at you guys like you're not singing the same exact song as me. So, but I do get pretty pumped up about the topic, and I do like to joke that what I lack in intelligence I may make up for with enthusiasm and bad humor. So anyway, but check us out and let police and teachers know what we'll do, because we will spend a whole day with them. We're not just going to do an hour in service, and we will come to them and actually be with them, and that's free of charge. We just want to contribute to good things. We don't have all the answers, but we got some of them. and I'm confident of that because we've helped measurably improve outcomes in some systems that we've gotten to help work in. And so just really excited to be here and share what we're doing and to keep doing that with you guys today. So some folks may be viewing this. It will be recorded as well to be made available for folks that needed to catch it at a different time. And so we appreciate you guys for tuning in your PJs or wherever you're at and whatever. Hope that you're in a safe and comfortable spot and not getting too distracted if you're driving or whatever. Try not to be too funny or whatever, make you drive off the road or something. So but anyway, so just again, thanks to everybody for being here, and thank you for your something, because Oklahoma needs a lot. We acknowledge many people are aware of the problems that exist for our kids and our families, and a lot of people just walk on by and say, yeah, what are you going to do? It's not my job, it's not my responsibility, it is too big, it's too much. Well, it's all of our jobs, it's all our responsibility, and the problems in the world, they're becoming all our problem. There are problems in our society that are becoming increasingly inescapable. And so we've all got a duty to help make our society safer and healthier for kids. And so it's our ethical duty. And so anyway, this today is not for ethics. I did not approve this, get this one applied for ethics, but so I don't want to say ethics too many times. People think that, but we can always talk about ethical treatment. It's always okay to talk about what's most ethical, moral, humane, and safe for kids. So anyway, that being said, thanks for being here. Today, one of the slides that didn't make it into the presentation is I wanted to tell you about some of the kind of the places, the research, and some of the where the learning comes from, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so I've been studying trauma for the better part of 2 decades now, pretty intensively, and I write about it and I teach about it, so it's something I geek out on pretty hard. But as I was initially kind of getting into this field, I got to study with some people who were pretty fancy, and so first I got to help with the implementation of the sanctuary and START models, and so those are evidence-based models for organizational culture. So those are not actual treatment, but those are about structural changes, because when culture is not trauma-informed, there's nice buildings that not so nice things sometimes happen inside of. And so really important for us to inform organizational culture, because of course culture we know is what we learn from those that come before us and those who are around us. And so what happens on paper as far as treatment, policy, and procedure in hospitals and in outpatient settings, it sometimes looks different in real life than it does on paper. And so, organizational culture is something we really need to think about. I also got to study with the original founders of the TFCBT, Trauma-Focused Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. Now, I didn't follow them around and shadow them and study them extensively, but I did get to take some workshops with them early on in this grant that we were a part of. And I also got to take a 12-week training with someone named Dr. Bruce Perry, and a lot of you guys are probably familiar with him. He just does some really fascinating stuff with neuron sequencing. So he's the founder of the neurosequential model of therapeutics, and of course it'll make you smarter just to say that. But getting to learn from all of these different sources. You got Dr. Sandy Bloom and Joe Benamati with their sanctuary and START models, and Deblinger and Cohen and Manarino with the TFCBT. I've gotten some really awesome learning opportunities. As I've rolled these concepts over and over and over again in my mind, I'm recognizing that there's many puzzle pieces And while we get sometimes attached to our favorite kind of treatment or our favorite modality or theorist or whatever, we can recognize that anything that has merit, it doesn't fit for every situation, but they do better inform our perspective and help us with ways to look at these problems. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is based on some of these academic, theoretical, and evidence-based concepts. So it's not just because Jeremy said so, but it's also some kind of original work as far as how these concepts have come out in my application and in my understanding. So anyway, so we're going to jump right in and talk about trauma and chronic stress, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I think I probably define trauma and chronic stress in words a little bit differently every time, and because well, that's what happens when it's not a scripted presentation, but also there's so many different ways to look at it. Trauma, we know that our emotions are made of electrical impulses and neurochemical information, and if we experience too much of our brain's own pain chemicals and indicators, it does leave a lasting impression on us that is measurable. And one of the things, trauma takes away our words sometimes, because we don't think really in words. I guess we do think in words, but we don't remember in words as much. We remember in different ways. And so, but experiences can overwhelm us and take away our words. And so words are sometimes what we need to be able to make sense of things. So, but trauma and chronic stress, these are not exactly the same. In fact, trauma is certainly going to be a more noticeable experience. It's something that, when something really bad happens to us, that's what I tell kids. It's when a really bad thing happens to us and when things are different after that. And so, one of the things we do notice with complex trauma, with complex PTSD, sometimes it gets a little blurry with chronic stress because it's not always apparent where one trauma ended and the next began, because usually when something changes after a really significant life-altering event, you notice where it came from. But if life was continuing to injure us, if you were traumatized over and over again, then it sometimes wasn't always clear where our bad feelings and memories came from. So anyway, but trauma and chronic stress, I think it's really important for us to continue to identify these as injuries. Because I think most people would want to be nice to somebody if they've been through a lot, until that injured person is mean to them, until that injured person provokes some strong, emotional response, and until they make us mad or hurt our feelings. Because injured people do injured things. And so, and some of those injured behaviors, some of those injured patterns of behavior and reaction are the very things that kind of alienate them from the very supports, the people, places, and things that they need. And so, when I was injured as a kid with my leg, it was broken. They've often said, these types of injuries will entail some moodiness, some acting out, lashing out, different things. And people cut me some slack because it was so apparent that I was injured. I was hit by a truck on my motorcycle, as a couple of you guys know, and so it broke my tibia and my fibia. And I lost my starting job on the football team, and I was immobilized, and I was all shredded up. I was in pretty rough shape, but it could have been worse. I was very, very lucky. But they said I would be hard to live with because of the severity of the injury, the pain, the immobilization. And people, for the most part, were patient with me when I wasn't able to be patient with them, when I lashed out because I felt bad. When I was moody or irrational, because I was hurting. Now, traumatized people, it's not always so obvious. Now, if they've got a black eye and a fat lip, you know, we might recognize that they've been through some violence perhaps recently or whatever. But a lot of times, you know, weeks or months have gone by or longer, and the initial blows to our body, if there were any, have healed. And so then injured people are just injured with us. And those injured people do injured things, and they make us mad, they hurt our feelings, and then it's harder to be supportive and patient in what people need unless we're trauma informed, unless we know what to expect and how to prepare ourselves as professionals and how to prepare family members and supporters of the injured. Now, and again, I think a lot of us come to this work very honestly. If you have no traumatic injuries, if you've never been hurt, you know, by this traumatic world, you know, high five. We don't wish that upon you. We hope that everybody can get to a safe and healthy and happy existence. But most humans have some trauma, and I dare say, you know, even if it's just the natural loss of loved ones, that can be traumatic. But we also know that trauma is most devastating when it happens in key developmental years. And so it's going to be most harmful to kids. And of course, kids, their brains are not as developed. So, you know, a trauma that happens beyond age 25 when our brain's done growing, while can still be very devastating, life-altering, you know, and it all depends on what, you know, type of trauma it is. But it does a lot more for that brain that is still, you know, kind of finding its developmental way. So anyway, as always, I do want to make sure that I'm checking the message board for comments and questions. You know, if you have a good one, I will, like I said, share it on the recorded feed as well. I won't put anyone's face or voice on our Zoom stuff or on our recording. So I want to protect your privacy and your participation. I promise, for those of you that have been with me, a couple of these things are foundational, but we're going to talk about some different stuff as well. But I think, again, when we think about how trauma injures us, I think it's important for us to measure our body, our brain, because it's not just a metaphorical injury. If we can look into the brain, we can see that it does cause overdevelopment in certain parts of the brain, including the nervous system and limbic system. And so, that's measurable, you know, and so that causes us to keep experiencing feelings, you know, when perhaps they're no longer being signaled by the external environment. And so, but we can measure disconnectivity among the different parts. You know, we have our hippocampus for short-term memory and our cerebral cortex for more complex, thinking and memory. And there's some disconnection because we need our dendrites and our neurons to connect those parts of our brain, because short-term learning has to go to long-term learning. And so, and of course, when we have disruptions in those connections, of course, kids are struggling to maintain and retain the things that they learn in school each day. And so, now again, what I'm going to talk with you about today, we're going to have a kind of a repetitive theme. You know, ICC, you know, some people, what's that mean? Identify, challenge, and change. You know, all kinds of smart people come up with their own little initials and acronyms, so I felt like I had to come up with my own, but it just came so naturally. And so because we do need to identify the injuries first, and we need to identify how these injuries have affected us. And so we noticed that sleep is disrupted. You know, we have more heartbeats per minute, even in a resting state, less REM sleep, which is of course going to be disruptive to our restorative processes when our brain is, it's committing, memory to learning. And it's when our body is restoring itself from wear and tear on the body and bugs and flus and illnesses or whatever. So all the things that want to invade us and make us sick, we need our restorative processes. So again, without sleep we age faster and we die sooner. So it's going to be really important to understand how trauma has injured us there, so we can take appropriate steps. And so a couple of, it affects our nervous system, it affects our digestion. So again, I think it's important for us to recognize the physical aspect of an emotional injury, because people have often treated trauma and an emotional problem as somehow lesser or less legitimate, as something like a medical problem. But when we go to scanning someone's brain and their heart and their nervous system and their REM sleep, we can start to see that this is a physical impact that's manifesting in an emotional, in a behavioral way. And so that is why that so many strictly behavioral approaches to addressing emotional problems are short-term and don't typically work. You guys remember the ACEs study? Quick quiz. The ACEs study, it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, you know that. But they weren't studying childhood trauma initially. They were studying something else. So somebody else gets a bonus point if they can tell us what was actually being studied in the ACEs study. So does anyone have that? So somebody's going to have it. If not, I'm not going to tell you. No, I'm just kidding.
There we go.
You got it. You got it, brother. Absolutely. The Center for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente were studying people who struggled with obesity, and most of them in the weight loss program did typically lose weight successfully, but they gained it back, didn't they? And so, and in gaining it back, it was clear that the program wasn't really a long-term success. But they did start to study the participants, and they looked into the backgrounds and found the ACEs. Of course, we found that 10 different types of common trends of childhood trauma began to emerge, and so without addressing why the eating was happening, then it was going to happen again. It was going to continue to happen, and people need to understand their own injuries. We don't just need an expert to tell us how to lose weight or how to feel better emotionally. We've got to give people the tools. And that's part of ethical treatment, I believe, as well. I should have done this for ethics, but that's part of ethical treatment as well. Giving people the information that they need to make the most informed decision. But anyway, so it's an injury. It changes our brain, it changes our heart, and it changes our nervous system in measurable ways. And it has real symptoms and everything, just like a cold or a flu or a cancer or something. These are real things. And so we have to understand these injuries first before we're able to challenge and change how they've affected us. And so there's brain scans that I'll show you in a minute. But one of the other things that has anyone ever been so stressed out that they lost their appetite? Of course, yeah. Ever did that? Yeah. And of course, in stressful jobs like we have to really be careful with that, don't we? And so, but think about this, when trauma is experienced significantly before age 7, if it's really intense or significant trauma, it often stunts their growth. Boys and girls tend to be shorter if they have significant trauma before age 7. And another indicator is pubic development. Little girls tend to hit puberty earlier, and little boys tend to hit puberty later if the trauma has been significant or repeated before age 7. So again, thinking about that, how our body doesn't want to feed itself when we're stressed, because our body senses that there's some other more pressing need. And so that's literally what's happening in little bodies when they're being injured. Their body is having to prioritize for which development is okay right now, which appetite is okay to feed with. If it is so, physiologically, I think there's people that could probably help us speculate a bit more. But one of the things I find really interesting is the fact that girls would hit puberty earlier and boys later. I wonder what natural or biological function that serves.
I don't know.
I mean, I can only imagine. So I have as many questions sometimes as answers. So if you guys in your big brains have any good thoughts to share with us. But again, I think it's just important for us to see this as the injury that it is. And so, are we showing them the brain scans now, Travis?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so you can look at some of the examples. If anyone wants a copy of this PowerPoint, I will absolutely send it to you. We share information. We ask that you don't forward it around. If I know somebody else wants a copy of it, have them email it. We'll send it to them too. We just want to know where our stuff is. But I didn't scan these brains. That was this is public record kind of research. But it is important for us to recognize our brain is use dependent, and the more certain systems are activated, the more they grow. Certainly we can see that certain aspects of the limbic system and nervous system have been flexed or activated too often, and so they become overdeveloped. And so if I work out my left arm too much, it's going to become bigger maybe than the right arm. And I probably spent too much time working on it, and then I didn't work on the right arm so much. And then if I did it too much, then it wants to start spasming and working on its own or becoming unusable at times. It's either overactive and anxious and spasming, or it's depressed and injured. And so that happens in a way with our brain and nervous system. So it's important for us to recognize those injuries. I wonder where they got those non-traumatized brains. Since we all have pain and loss, one of the things that we know is the way we're supported, the way we're protected in those formative years, our key relationships really does feed our resilience. So everybody has some of those shocks to the brain, but some have a lot more and a lot less support to get through it. So breaking down the injury is important as we do, so we can think about how we identify, challenge, and change. I'm going to have you guys think in that ICC, identify, challenge, and change, before the day's done, hopefully. Obviously, this is a physical injury. When our body is hurt, it hurts us, and so that can be physically and emotionally, psychologically traumatic. And so there are physical symptoms, and of course bruises, lacerations, things that happen from physical or sexual trauma, and so this is also a diagnosable injury. Very oftentimes not everyone goes and has their problem addressed, but we of course see that post-traumatic stress, chronic stress, and stressor-related disorders, depression, anxiety, different things, and again the words just changed again on a lot of stuff. We're on DSM number 6, so words, we don't want to get caught up too much in what words we use to say what is wrong with somebody, when it's really about an injury, and trauma and chronic stress. Those human problems, the sources of them change, but the way they affect us, that's there. So it's also a social injury, though. It's a family injury. It affects the way we engage our families, our friends, our loved ones, the way we're able to perform in a functional role or a job, and so again, when we don't understand the injuries of trauma, and sometimes a little bit anyway, these are symptoms that are easy to judge, to punish, and to criticize. And that doesn't help. And so as, ethical, moral, humane human beings, we want to help people not judge the injured, criticize or shame the injured, and compound their injury. Because when you feel lack of self-worth, if you feel like you're terrible, then it is, of course, harder to recover. And, recovery is possible, but it's hard. And so we've got to, I say we help people forgive themselves for being injured, especially when it wasn't their fault. Because these are the injuries that get in the way and prevent us from having the lives we want, the happiness, the health, the families, the friends. It's preventing us from, and again, traumatic injuries hurt people from getting help. And so how many of the times, kids that need more support in school are getting less because they make a teacher or a principal mad, and we're all human. Who hasn't been talked, ugly, to by a patient who was struggling and didn't have some emotional reaction to that? We're human. But we need to, understand it. And know how to guard against it. There was this kid once. He would punch us and hit us and kick us and spit on us. And he was a big kid. He injured some of us in the children's hospital, and he didn't talk to us at all for the first couple of days. But I remember we had to engage in a hold with him, and he was fighting us and just trying to tear us up. And he really hit one of the other staff members really hard and broke his glasses, and it was just an ordeal constantly. We realized some of his triggers, if you walked within his range or up behind him or certain things, it wasn't a good thing. And some of those reactions were unconscious. You see, reactions to pain, if you feel a burn or a sting or something hits you or hurts you, you're not thinking, gosh, that hurts. Now, what's the best and most healthy and wholesome and appropriate way to not feel this pain? You react to it unconsciously. And so a lot of people have had more pain to react to and have become more reactive. Anyway, this kid, he eventually started to show some signs of improvement. He even started speaking with us. And so I'm not going to say that we rewrote the whole story for this kid. And sometimes I kind of wonder. It's been some years now. But he said, I praised him one day for doing so much better and being safer with us all and not hurting us anymore. He said, when I was first here, I was bad. And I said, well, you were an injured kid doing what injured kids do. He said, but I was bad though. I was doing this and that, and and I remember I even spit on a guy. I said, I know, it was gross. He goes, and that's when I knew y'all cared. And I didn't understand. I said, well, what do you mean? That's because you wouldn't do it back. Because injured people don't even feel safe with themselves, and they a lot of times do regret how they act out with others, but they don't get a chance to regret acting out with others if others punish them and abuse them for symptoms of an injury. And so that's why it's so important for us to understand, what these symptoms are, and start to look for their triggers too. Start to say, how can I not set you off? I'm not trying to put anyone on eggshells or kiss anyone's but what I'm saying is, if we can avoid unnecessary escalation, then we absolutely should. And understanding these injuries, helps us do that, because a great many kids, a great many injured people, a lot of the homeless people you see walking down the street begging and looking for ways to continue to self-medicate with drugs or alcohol or find a little bit of food. Those were initially people that had unattractive symptoms and didn't respond and be appropriate and obedient and cooperative, and those people ended up in the streets or in the prisons or in the graveyards. So any of you guys that have worked in this field long enough know that we help some of them, as many as we can. Some don't make it. We can't help them all. Some of them are so injured that it affects their ability to receive our support. But we keep trying and we keep looking for the angle, looking for the way to connect with those patients. So anyway, but I think it's always important for us to spend some time to understand the injury, and then maybe next how it injures our brain and our perceptions. Is that what's next, Travis? Injured cognitions, though, and adaptations. I define adaptation as a developmental flexibility. Our brain has to be able to go in different directions as needed, as with our body and our growth. We do a lot in response to our environment. And so it's good that we're able to adapt to a changing world, because it's changing and it continues to change. And so we have to have some developmental flexibility. But when we adapt to dysfunction, when we adapt to danger, when we adapt to harm or violence, unmet need or dysfunction of some sort, it does harm us in some more complicated ways, perhaps. And so, thinking about early and repeated trauma and what that does for our brain, and what kind of data that provides for that brain, and what kind of instinct. So what that does, though, of course, is it creates that less conscious reaction. If I touch a hot burner at thousands of miles per second, a signal goes to my brain to tell me not to do that. I don't have the time to think, though, don't do that. I just say, oh, don't do that. Instinctively and reactively. And so trauma causes people to be less conscious in their actions and reactions. And so that's something we have to help them understand. And so, because as you understand what you react to and what your triggers are, we can start to plan for those things. But thinking about the detrimental experiences, the dysfunctional data that's going into our brain, because again, it really provides some very detrimental familiarities from our influences, from our norms, from our examples, and we can only pull data from our brain that's in there. And so when kids are growing up, their brain isn't kicking out bad data and dysfunctional data and only letting in good data and healthy and functional data. It's taking it all in and it's going in files. And so again, those are the files, those are the cognitive cookies they have to reach in for when they reach into their cognitive cookie jar. And one of the things that we know about trauma is it increases our risk. It increases so many different risks that we have and vulnerabilities, because an internal injury becomes external risk, because, again, if we have more pain, then we're going to have more to react to. People with more pain have a greater need for relief. So I think it's train of thought.
Next is adapting.
No. What was that last bullet again?
External injuries, increasing risk.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things that I really try to impress upon people is addiction, chemical or other types of addictions, and unhealthy relationships become a great risk. Predatory relationships, dysfunctional or codependent relationships, because again, when we've had unmet need, it causes people to either consciously or subconsciously go in seek of meeting these needs for relief, for somebody to care, because all people, we are social emotional beings. We need somebody to care, and so predatory people swoop in on those people who have of great human need. They take advantage of that. And so, what's the fourth one?
Adapting to upset.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things, we live in a world that can be kind of discouraging, frustrating, and just stressful, upsetting, anxiety provoking. And so, again, going back to that developmental flexibility, going back to, what we've got to do to survive certain situations. I think that it's apparent that if you have too much discouragement, frustration, and upset, you start to do it to yourself. And that is one of the, I believe, cognitive adaptations from despair, chronic stress, injury, frequent disappointment, being let down a lot, And so, what's the last bullet, Travis?
Established.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things also that I wanted to make sure that I remembered about this slide was that established reactivity. These are long established patterns, neural pathways. We have parts of our brain that kind of store our gross motor and fine motor functions. We have a part of our brain that stores, our words and how we use them. And so certain emotions and reactions have become hardwired over time to these ways of communicating and these ways of interacting or, reacting. And so one of the things, either by norm, or there's all kinds of different things, but these are often accepted as okay. If yelling at people or doing drugs or all kinds of injured behaviors that cause more injury to self or others are often accepted anyway. That's what I do. And so, or those are my triggers, and that's what happens when that sounds like cognitively they know they got the first step, but then accepted their reaction to it, and this is often despite outcomes. This is often despite cyclical patterns of reaction and regret. This is despite health or family or emotional or functional or employment, all kinds of different problems. But we continue to cling to those familiarities. And again, because change seems, pretty hard. It's unfamiliar. It's uncomfortable. And so anyway, it's well established and clung to in injured instinct, though. So I got to keep you guys awake on a Friday afternoon after lunch. So, emotional intelligence. I want to have some discussion because you guys are master's level clinicians with years of experience in this field and wisdom to share. So first off, what is it? What's emotional intelligence? What's your thought on that? And then I want to talk a little bit more. So, and I'm going to tell you what I think too. About what emotional intelligence is and why I think that is important. So, and this gives me a perfect coffee sipping opportunity.
Emotional intelligence.
One of the things I also forgot to note, need to do a little bit better job of housekeeping, but we will be taking a break at somewhere about midway through, and we will make that at least 10 minutes. And so we want brains, again, to be able to process information. And we get, our fill sometimes and then need to do something else for a little while. So we want to allow for this learning to be an actual process, not just one that you sit here for a certain amount of time so you can get your certificate. So, but anyway, emotional intelligence. Did we get any responses?
Somebody said they know your feelings.
Know your feelings. That's very good. Absolutely. I talk with people a lot about emotional intelligence, and so I've written and researched, and so I did not invent this topic. I hope to contribute to the knowledge and wisdom that is there. But emotional intelligence, I tell kids what your emotions are. Like, yeah, happy, mad, sad, yeah, okay. Of course, your feelings. Intelligence. I said, what's that? He said, that's how smart you are. That's right. So we want to be more intelligent about our feelings. And so, and our intelligence and our feelings, it's kind of funny to put them two together, because if you think about it, they're not happening in the same part of the brain. In fact, I call it that cognitive tug of war that I keep telling you guys about, because who among us, always just does what they know they ought to do? Because our emotional brain, our limbic system, it doesn't, really think. It just feels and wants and reacts. And so those two parts of the brain are kind of pulling on each other sometimes. One has to keep the other in check. Now, knowledge really does help us plan for and manage the other. And so, and again, I will ask each one of you, and hopefully you're paying attention and listening, but you don't have to say your feelings or process anything, but I want you to use a word in your mind, not out, you don't have to tell us anything, but think about what your emotional state is right now, and think about it in words. Now, what you're doing neurologically as this is happening is you're using the smart part of your brain, the cerebral cortex, to look down into the brain, into your limbic system, to see what it's doing. Your brain has these different emotional capacities. I put them into 4 different categories. Anger and sadness are negative motivators. They motivate us to change or accept something. Fear and stress responses are really, very important. And all emotional ranges and capacities are absolutely necessary for some aspect of our functioning or survival. But I say the most unpleasant emotions are the most key to our survival. And helping people understand their own feelings is important. Kids said, I know I shouldn't get mad. Well, sometimes, it's not pleasant to get mad, but the world will make you mad sometimes. It's what you do with it. And that has a lot to do with the data that was encoded on that brain. I tell kids, now hopefully you only had really healthy and, wholesome, examples of what it looks like and sounds like to have a feeling. But most of us, have had some less than positive examples. They didn't always know about or talk about this emotional intelligence stuff. And so again, we want to help kids recognize these capacities, and adults, people of all ages, need to become more emotionally intelligent so they know how to use their brain better. Because a lot of people feel like they're just along for the ride with whatever life is programmed within them, and we have some choice with awareness. We have the power to choose, and then, now, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because I do like to do discussion. And so why would emotional intelligence be fundamental in recovery from trauma and other, emotional problems? Why do you guys think emotional intelligence is so key to ICC? Oh, that rhymed. I like it. Yeah. Key to ICC. What do you guys think? Gives you. But while you're thinking of that, I'll tell you about those other emotional capacities. Anger, sadness. I've grouped them together. They're what I call negative motivators. They motivate us for change of something that doesn't feel, it feels negative. But our brain and those capacities are trying to help us improve on that situation, though. So anger or sadness are not wrong, not in a scientific context.
Somebody said like the movie Inside Out.
Yeah, like the movie Inside Out. Absolutely. Yeah, see, that movie helped get kids thinking about their different capacities. That these, they do have these different ranges. And but fear and stress responses help us react quickly and instinctively to a threat or a perceived threat, and that's absolutely key to survival. When you're, running away from a predator or trying to stop in time to not get into an accident or whatever, you're probably not thinking about, anything but what, the reaction. It's just. It snaps you into focus. If you're running away from a predator, you're not thinking about what you're going to have for dinner later. You're trying not to be dinner. And so hopefully you're not, in a neck of the woods or the jungle where you're running away from predators. But one of the things, though, when we think about trauma, though, You know, I get to thinking about things, and you know, when we're running away from danger, hopefully we're able to get away from it. So many kids are injured in their homes. You know, if you touch a hot burner, you pull away, because it's burning you. You're burning your flesh. So many kids, you know, and so many people in abusive and oppressive situations, they have to keep their hand on their burner and more of themselves on the burner. They don't get to pull away, you know, not able to escape that pain. And so anyway, but if we do have to experience fear or stress responses too much or too often, it does leave a lasting impression on our mind and our body, like we talked about with trauma. And again, chronic stress is not always as easy to notice, and it sometimes mystifies us a little bit when we have symptoms you know, that resemble the trauma, but not anything we can remember that was any big event. We were just always stressed out, so or whatever. So. And so, were there other thoughts? Has anyone shared yet on why they think emotional intelligence is so important to recovery? So, I'll tell you what I think if no one has it.
Not about that.
Not about that. So, Martina, what do you think? I'll put you on the spot. So.
Oh, well, it's so important because they have to be ready to deal with their trauma. And to be emotionally ready for it.
Yeah, they have to be emotionally ready to deal with their trauma. Absolutely. Well, you know, I think, again, part of emotional intelligence is, again, understanding those emotional capacities. And for instance, like happy emotions, those reinforce things that feel good and have a seemingly positive outcome. Now, I think it's important for us to think about, too, you know, how that part of our brain has developed. They said, you know, our brain is developed in an ancient way in ancient times. And so, in ancient times, there was more danger in the world where we really were running away from predators through the jungle or across the plain. And we were fighting and running away a lot. And so, I have to get myself back on track sometimes when I'm working from memory, guys. So thanks for bearing with me. But neurologists talk about there's something called the pain-pleasure balance. And so our brains were wired to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And that makes perfect logical sense, right? Of course. Who doesn't want to avoid things that hurt and go towards things that feel good? Of course. Now in the ancient world, it was a world of scarcity. The ancient world, there wasn't as many things that felt good, and there was lots of things that felt bad and scary and painful. And so our brain developed to try to balance this out, to try to go towards the pleasure. And so most forms of pleasure, they didn't have YouTube, they didn't have gambling, they didn't have nicotine or video games or alcohol, they didn't have as much of that stuff in ancient times. So the things that felt good were typically natural and okay for us. And so now in this day and age, the sources of our pleasure are vast and distracting. They present a great many options, and so there's a lot of artificial pleasure, I would say, as well. And so, and of course, this is where I talk about how we can be so much more at risk for addiction with trauma, with pain, with unmet emotional need, because again, we've had more pain, and so we're going to seek more pleasure. We're going to seek more relief, more distraction, more ways not to feel those feelings. And again, especially when kids are, anyone before the age of 25, they're going to be more reactive to their injuries without a good understanding or even a full ability to understand. So that's why we got to help them watch for those things along the way. But again, when we're thinking about things that produce dopamine and serotonin and those good feeling endorphins and neurotransmitters in our brain, when we think about those things, we need it's good to feel pleasure and all that, but you can choose pleasure too often, and even healthy forms of good feelings, if in excess, become avoidant mechanisms. These become ways to try not to feel our feelings. And so a person can go to the gym too much, or read too many, of their favorite novels, or play too many of their favorite video games, or go shopping too much, or eat too much of their favorite food. Good things in excess have us not doing some of these other things that we need to be doing and addressing. So again, emotional intelligence, though, it is about identifying some of the things that we do, when we do, what we do. And so I call them human tail wags. And so with our human tail wags, I call them that because my dogs always knock stuff off the coffee table with their big old floppy tails. And they, dogs, they get excited and that tail gets going, and they really can't manage that emotional / behavioral response. They don't have the ability. They have pretty small brains. Now humans, we have approximately 16 billion neurons in our cerebral cortex. That's, again, pound for pound, biggest brain in the universe. And so that gives us the ability to think about thinking, to recognize tendency, to recognize trigger, to recognize, I do that when that thing happens. Yeah. And so now doggies can't recognize, even if I get frustrated and get onto my doggies and tell them not to spill my Pepsi, the best cola. That's ridiculous.
You can say it, that's right.
We can get a poll on here of Pepsi versus Coke fans, and people who are right will get an extra CEU. No, I'm just kidding. But so no, again, they don't have the ability to watch out for those triggers. But the whole thing got me thinking about it. A tail of a dog is an extension of their spine, so it's connected through their nerves to their brainstem, to their limbic system, to their emotional brain. So their behavior is hardwired. Even when dogs have their tails cut off and they have little nubs, those things still try to wag. I didn't do that to my doggies. It seems kind of mean or whatever, but anyway, getting off topic. Now I can recognize the things that I do when I do, and so we want to help people recognize what I call their human tail wags, their triggers, and how they react to those things, because emotional intelligence is key to ICC, because this gives us the ability to recognize tendency and our ability to influence the ongoing development of our brain. And so for any of you that ever learned some bad stuff or went through something and reacted badly, that wasn't our fault, but wasn't it nice to know that we could keep learning and growing? And so I'm super pumped about our ability to keep growing and learning. And so, because again, that cognitive cookie jar, that vacuum of data, it's still happening. And so, but we can now, with intention, choose certain data. We can learn certain skills, through study and practice and role play, which it does take a lot of practice. But we can actually provide our brain with new data and consciously, cognitively practice at choosing those new data, those new skills. And over time, we're able to give ourselves new development, and it's of our choosing. And that's power. That's power. So many people have felt like they're really just kind of along for the ride with life. But wow, when we teach them information that helps them take charge of their own life and their own feelings and to not feel so out of control, that's healing. That's power. And so emotional intelligence, this is something that I'm trying to get to schools and to police. We've got to educate more emotionally intelligent. We've got to police more emotionally intelligent, and we've got to parent more emotionally intelligent. And if we could ever get it up there far enough, we'd govern. We'd like to see people govern with more emotional intelligence, because it's not this touchy-feely thing that we talk about with the sensitive types. It's about understanding the electrical impulses that are happening in our brain, and if we don't know what's happening and why, it's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and it's going to come out of us in one way or another. And so many people don't recognize their feelings, so they don't act upon them to address the need that is being indicated. you know, that the being signaled within the body, in the brain. And so a lot of people act out in ways that make it worse, or they repress or suppress the emotion in a way that just fails to address the need. But being emotionally intelligent isn't about being overly sensitive or overly, intellectualized. It's about understanding our brain so we can use it and not let it, let it work for us. Be in charge of it. And so again, every time I talk about emotional intelligence, I think again it comes out a little bit different, and that's okay. I want to keep finding as many angles as possible to help you guys think about these topics that but we can always continue to build on our knowledge and our wisdom. So understanding limbic reactivity. Now again, in continuing our emotional intelligence, we know that the limbic system is that part of our brain that stores our emotional capacities. And so it's not rational or logical. It doesn't make sense or think. It just it helps navigate life, though. It reacts. And our emotional response to things in the environment is obviously very, very important. Now, one of the things that we know, again, trauma is causing overdevelopment in that part of the limbic system. And so we already know that part of our brain doesn't think or make sense, but causing it to be overdeveloped or overreactive is going to produce some problems. And so, again, these different emotional capacities. I studied different neurologists, and there was one, and I tried to find him in time for you guys today, and I'm going to keep looking because it's some research I haven't looked at in a while. But it's about access of our brain. And it's about which parts are being activated by different processes. And so, what's bullet 3 on there, Travis?
Use-dependent brain.
Yeah. So.
Susceptible to traumatic dysfunctional adaptation.
Yeah. So again, our use-dependent brain is going to have a susceptible to traumatic disconnectivity, overdevelopment, underdevelopment, several different problems. That's not the bullet I was thinking about, though. What's 4?
More injuries, increasing
Pessimism,
pessimism,
despair, emotional.
Okay. Is that the last bullet?
One more after that about pessimism.
Huh?
Pessimism activated by.
Oh, okay. So anyway, they can scan a person's brain, obviously, and tell what parts are active, what's lighting up on the screen, And again, I want to be careful with this research because I am not a neurologist, but I'm not going to harm anyone with my limited engagement here. So, but one of the things that we can see is when people are thinking pessimistically or negatively, that we're seeing that there are more activity in the limbic system, and that's notable. And I feel like again that's an adaptation first to being physically or emotionally harmed, not being protected or not being able to meet needs or address needs or be safe. So there's a lot of different adaptations that go along with that. But it's also about that overdevelopment. It's constantly wanting to fire. When we think about the symptoms of trauma, we remember that there's re-experiencing and intrusive symptoms. That's where the past is intruding on the present. That's where we think about things we don't want to think about. We remember things we don't want to remember. And we even have dreams or nightmares or flashbacks. These are the past cognitions continuing to jump into the present and disrupt. And so that's part of that overactive limbic system. That emotional and mental Rolodex just keeps spinning and often bringing forward a lot of those past dysfunctional or negative experiences. And so the hyperarousal is one of the other symptoms of trauma. And so hyperarousal, of course, if there's re-experiencing and there's intrusive symptoms, that's the cognitive emotional part of the injury. There's hyperarousal is that physical activation of body and nervous system. That causes people to be jumpy and set off really easily, overstimulated, the sleep problems, all those different problems that come. And this is, again, conditioning of the nervous system and limbic system. So it's really important for us to understand. And then we're going to have all kinds of problems with avoidance and numbing if we have repeated trauma, if we're going to have experiencing and intrusive symptoms that continue to intrude our emotions and our cognitions. And then we're going to have physical arousal or discomfort in our body. Well, obviously, again, avoidant mechanisms are natural because people with more pain or discomfort are going to have more to avoid. More to pull away from. And so it's important for us to think about this. But also, when the nervous system has been pumping, when our body has been really, really tense for a really long time, it is not always easy to turn that off, or sometimes it's exhausting. And so we see a lot of emotional numbness, and dissociation, depressive symptoms, substance abuse, all kinds of problems come from that third category of post-traumatic stress symptoms: avoidance, numbing, and dissociation. So we want to dissociate from experiences that are overwhelming, painful, terrible. We want to disconnect from that in some way. So anyway, this neurologist, though, he was doing a study, and again, I need to brush off some of the data, but here's what I can tell you about this research. This kid was sitting in the chair, and he's got electrodes hooked up to his face and his head and, whatever, And so they're scanning him and they're talking with him, they're asking him some questions. And so he's a college kid, and he's behind on probably everything. He's college kids are always broke, right? And they're always like sleep deprived. Is that correct, Travis? Yeah. Like starving, Yeah. Okay.
Ramen.
Yeah. I always got to feed this guy when he comes over. He said, "Well, we're so busy, I got to remind him to eat." So again. And having constant deadlines and pressure about school, it can be overwhelming. Then you get in the real world, see that there's written. I'm just kidding. No. But this young man had a lot of limbic system activity. And I can imagine my memory's inventing that he had like a stressed look on his face also. I don't know if that's accurate or not because I have video of it. And so they were asking him questions, and so and so he was talking about stressed out and all these things, and he had a very pessimistic or negative outlook, and so the doctor started asking him some questions. So I'm going to come back to our study. I'll leave you in suspense about our study participant for a minute, but it did coincide that his negative outlook was apparent from the screen, what was happening on the screen. So and I wonder if it'll look different if he was experiencing happy emotions, if there was those positive feelings going on around in there. So anyway, what's the next slide, Travis?
The central cerebral axis.
Okay. So again, the top part of our brain is the prefrontal cerebral cortex, and that is the last part of our brain to finish growing and complete its formation. And so now our brain starts as a little bitty, kind of thing at our brain stem, kind of like the beginnings of a plant or a flower. And so they used to say our brain grows from top to bottom, and that's still mostly true, but it grows from inside to out and top to bottom. And so, who among us that are participating can tell us how long it takes for the brain to develop? I probably already said it once.
Yeah, 25.
Okay. Well, see, I was asking the audience, and so
Sorry.
yeah, they're the ones we're trying to keep engaged. You can fall asleep over there. I don't care.
Hey, how rude.
So yeah, again, brain does take 25 years or so, roughly. There's no like 25th year, 365th day, like boom, all right, we're there. So I mean, human growth and development is not linear, always on the same exact timeline. But this is our cerebral cortex. This is our smart brain. This is where thinking, logic, memory, problem solving take place. And so this is why it's so key to support and protect kids, because they can help kind of understand and address some of their own traumas a bit better beyond that level of development. So this is responsible for impulse control, regulation of emotion. I'm not remembering this one so well. The fourth one?
16 billion neurons.
Okay, yeah, I already told them that. So there's 16 billion neurons in this thing. And so, but one of the things also, going back to our neurologist in his study, he shows us that, of course, optimism, or believing that things are possible, or believing in what is possible, is actually providing us greater access, or it coincides with operations of the cortex. And so that's powerful knowledge, because well, back to our study participant, they were. They asked him a series of questions, and I can't remember all the responses, but the theme was it wasn't going to work out. The theme was that it was not going to work. Whatever, and so I seem to recall he had college deadlines, and he had a lot of stuff due, and he wasn't going to have to do it. He wasn't going to make it. He didn't have time. So he asked him, so well, what would it take for the opposite to be true? You're saying that it won't work. What would it take for it to work? Well, there's not any way, And he said, well, yeah, I know. Maybe this may be a true reality, but what would it take if you could alter reality? What would it take, just say that you could, what would it take? And so the young man says, I could take this step. And I could take this step, and he started listing. I remember he listed some things that he could do to get assistance, to get extensions, to get extra time, and he basically, his affect started to change. He started to look more thoughtful, more determined. And so this was, again, it's been some years since I saw this video, but I was able to see it. And also they looked at the brain scan. They looked at what was on the monitor, and they found that, all this limbic system activity was starting to quiet down. It was starting to go a little bit darker with the activation of the cortex. And so he said, maybe I could do this, and actually this is one thing that I could do. But he'd already closed the door on positive possibilities. He had already, limbic system was saying, where when the limbic system's loud, it's hard to hear the cortex. When the limbic system is lighting up in that scan, it's hard to access our brain. And so that makes it so essential for teaching people real coping skills, real things that help quiet the limbic system, and ways to challenge thoughts that don't benefit. Because this young man began the conversation talking about how it wasn't going to work out, and he finished with a plan for how it would. And so we've got to help people challenge thoughts that don't benefit them. Now, one thing I won't do is tell somebody, you just need to think more positively. Anyone like to be told when they're feeling bad? When they're feeling negative or down about something, that they just need to think more positively? Who loves that? It's good advice, right? No. It's not. It's certainly not master's level clinical, advice. And so now, but we do hope for people to reach and find a more positive outlook. But we got to show them how. We got to teach them how to get to that access. We got to quiet the limbic system, because make no mistake about it, hope is a feeling, but it starts in the cortex. I like that.
Yeah, you go.
Well, hope is a feeling, but it's a belief. Belief, trains, it makes me try harder. It leads to effort, which leads to outcome. And so again, this whole emotional intelligence stuff, it's not just telling people to be smarter and cope better, and it really is about applying this in real ways, so people can have the best parts of their brain. Because again, challenging every thought that doesn't benefit, it doesn't always lead us to a happy ending, but it gives us a better fighting chance. Because again, let's look at that cognitive triangle. Is that next?
Yep.
Okay. So you'll remind you guys, cognitive behavioral graphics like that. That's the only thing I really like about cognitive behavioral therapy, really, is, understanding thoughts, feelings, actions. I don't like to be told you got to do this step and that's too prescriptive. This is human work. But I will say that when we understand how we're, our thoughts and how this affects our feelings, and then leading to our actions or inactions or reactions, and then we truly can move forward in a more planned and calculated way, certainly a less reactive way. But because, again, I don't want to give people just sound advice. I don't want some expert tell me what I ought to do because they're smarter than me. What I want to do is help people understand what's going on in their brain so they can, make the best decision of their, people are their own experts about their own life. We don't understand what all they have to deal with, and so, but again, when I get to helping people understanding this stuff, helping people understand neurologically that there is a connection between our thoughts in our brain, our feelings, and our actions. And thoughts really do happen first, So what time is it, guys?
It's 2:26.
I think now is an excellent time to take a break. But if there's anything that's fresh on your mind, though, right now, first and foremost, I would like to give you the opportunity to question, comment, throw digital rocks at me, give me digital high fives. So right on. Are there any questions or comments at this point?
Not right now.
Okay. I will encourage folks to get up and move around. I would encourage you we're going to take at least 10, maybe 12 minutes. And so I would encourage you to move about, circulate your blood, take some good healthy breaths of fresh air and maybe sunshine and oxygen, all that good stuff. But that will help you continue to learn, because I know you guys, y'all aren't just sitting here to get the certificate. You guys want to learn and hopefully share some stuff with me, because I want to learn from you guys too. So that's just like a bonus for me. But again, we will sign off for just a few minutes, and Travis is going to change batteries. So don't freak if it goes black for a little while. We will be back. See you in a bit. Welcome back. Hopefully everybody made it back from break with us. Feel free to say hello and let us know that you're back and you've been tapping a toe, waiting, wondering where I am. So anyway, welcome back. All right, very good. Hopefully you spent your break in a way that was socially and emotionally healthy for you. Go say hi to somebody, or send a text to your friend or your partner or your kid, something like that. Get up, move around, take a quick walk. I don't know. I had a little bit of salad myself, so I'm hoping I don't have it in my teeth right now.
No.
So I feel like I do.
You're good.
Now that
You're fine.
So, okay, but welcome back to the second half of ICC for Healing and Hope, the cognitive challenge of changing your brain. So we're going to keep talking about this and how we can have a better understanding, how we can use our emotional intelligence to be better prepared for some of the other reactivity and symptoms that come from injury, unmet need. And so one of the things that I've often said, that we're going to be treating regardless of the diagnosis, now of course, the diagnosis does matter, of course, but one of the things that it working with children, we're going to see a lot of trauma and chronic stress. We're going to see a lot of unmet emotional needs, and we're going to see a lot of dysfunctional norms or detrimental familiarities. And so those are the three things that I tell clinicians to keep targeting those things. You supervisors that are working with younger clinicians, offer guidance on, the words again are going to change, but we need to keep targeting. And I'll say those again if you guys would like for me to do that. It's trauma and chronic stress, of course, at the heart of many. Anxiety, behavioral problems, depressive disorders, learning disabilities, developmental issues, absolutely health problems, all kinds of things. But trauma and chronic stress is first. Unmet emotional needs, because again, when we don't have our needs met, we go, not always consciously, but we have a tendency to gravitate towards the meeting of a need. And so, and then those dysfunctional norms, detrimental familiarities, things that shouldn't be familiar to us. Cognitive and emotional data, examples of what feelings look and sound like that shouldn't be, that are not pro-social or functional, and very often detrimental to our existence. So those are those three things that I often talk about. ICC and that thing. So one of the things, I think we have to find creative ways to connect with patients, with students, with people to help them understand. And so, and if you got to break out a little bit of Lauryn Hill, a little bit of that thing, one of the things that when I talk about human tail wags, the things that we do to get in our own way. And so I think it's important for us to understand that thing that we do. And I'm not talking about us necessarily as clinicians, but as people, if we're guiding the treatment process, if we can help people understand that thing that they do, that unconscious response, that maladaptive coping, mechanism that may have developed with their excessive or repeated pain. And so if we can help people recognize that thing that they do, so I call it that thing. But does anyone have any cute little references or something that's memorable or helps kind of stick in the mind of a patient to help them recognize what I call is that thing that we do, or injured behaviors? Because the problem with injured behaviors is they make us more injured. Injured people do injured things that further and exacerbate their injuries and deepen those, and often create some new ones as well. So how do you guys get people to recognize that thing. If you have any references to helping people recognize, stinking thinking or problematic responses to our feelings, because it's not wrong to have feelings, but sometimes what we do or how we react with them can be. And so I call it that thing. But what we want to do, part of that thing is the initial step to the ICC process. Again, imagine those timelines they used to show you in history class, and this thing happened, in this chronological left to right kind of order. And so imagine our own timeline, and there at the beginning, that's our birth, or when our parents, were whatever. Barry White's playing. So there's the beginning of the timeline, and for a lot of kids, not very far down that timeline began the trauma, and began the injury, began a series of unconscious reactions, and again, kids developed injured behaviors because they were trying not to feel their injured feelings. Again, our brain was wired to avoid pain, seek pleasure, seek relief. And again, a lot of kids weren't able to always retract from their abusers or their environment, their community, their school, or their place that wasn't safe. And of course, we know that trauma's out there in the world, danger's out there in the world, but it does a special kind of harm to us when we're harmed frequently in the place where we're supposed to be safe. When people inside our home hurt us, or when someone hurts us, in our home community. So anyway, we've got to recognize that thing that we do that keeps us stuck, that keeps us from getting well, that keeps our people away from us. Because again, these are the behaviors that hurt us and hurt others, and again continue a lot of those cycles of regret that people are looking for a way to get out of. When people say, I don't want to relapse again, I don't want to hit again, I don't want to do these things again, I believe a lot of times those are sincere statements. People experience sincere remorse and regret and shame at at these perpetuated cycles. And yet a lot of times, without a better understanding, without preparing for that thing, then a lot of times whoops, I did it again and I regret it again, and I guess that's just what I do. And so, we don't want to see people succumb to a developed instinct, because it does take some time to change, but it is absolutely possible. And one of the neat things about this whole changing our brain thing, if anyone's ever been a cigarette smoker, I'm going to just fess up. I used to smoke cigarettes. I'm a healthy person. I want to be a healthy person for myself, for my kid, for my family, and also for the people who look up to me. And so I'm not knocking any of you nicotine lovers. I just spit out my nicotine gum moments ago. But the thing is, for anyone that's ever quit smoking, you know how hard it was. Because again, this was a hardwired neural pathway, because again, stress equals cigarette smoke. Happy equals cigarette smoke. Relax equals cigarette smoke. There's all these hardwired connections, and a lot of that's aided by the addictive component, the chemical component. But a lot of different behaviors, punching, and when anger, cutting to depression, yelling, or doing something. These can become hardwired neurological connections, and it feels all of a sudden quite instinctive when we do it over and over and over again, and then it happens without thought. It's just a reaction. And so again, when we can recognize that thing that we do and why we do it, when we do it, we can start to plan for it and understand that something else is possible. We have the ability to, again, influence the ongoing development of our brain based on what we do. But how we do that, it takes a lot of understanding, that emotional intelligence piece that you guys were talking about with me earlier. So, you going to say something?
when starting like with trauma in adults, you know, it doesn't happen overnight, so this is not going to be repaired overnight.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time.
Thank you. And so it really does. Martina was just talking about, as a fellow clinician and a treatment provider, she reminds that, you know, especially with adults, kids sometimes, once you get them on board with change, they can really get on board, but sometimes adults are, you know, can be a little more stuck. But if you think about it, they've got a longer timeline. They've got more use, more practice with those dysfunctional maladaptive coping skills that were developed. And again, if those things ever did help them, again, if violence, aggression, being dysfunctional in a dysfunctional world to get through it because that was the norm for the family or the neighborhood or whatever, see, what happens is those skills persist into parts of life where they're no longer as valid or necessary or appropriate or safe. You know, and so again, one of the things that we have to do is give our brain new data and practice choosing that new data, and that, you know, and that does take a cognitive choice and a lot of coping to keep the limbic system at bay, to give us actual access so we can hear all the good stuff that we've got up top. So yeah. So thank you for that.
You're so welcome.
Other questions or comments?
Not at this time.
All right. So again, some of this is a little bit of a repeat. Again, when we do have such negative data that we continue to experience on a regular basis, when we do have so much frustration and discouragement, we can adapt to start to do it to ourselves, but we've got to recognize when we're doing that. You know, and not consider it just needing to be more positive, but understanding the root of our thinking. You know, understanding the root of, you know, of our discouragement, of our frustration, and how we've come to start to do it to ourselves. Because there are these concepts called learned helplessness or traumatic reenactment. And so you see this a lot. If somebody's been helpless, like a child in an ongoing abusive situation or any number of types of abuse, it's against human nature to be helpless. And so, of course, if we're helpless, we, you know, do a couple of different things. The instinct is to escape, you know, to adapt, or to experience destruction or death. And so, so to be helpless or to be victimized, again, it's against our human nature. So if we can't escape, then we do adapt, and in doing so, we can be harmed. So, you know, I talk to you guys a lot about the little mice that get shocked in the experiments. Well, mice can go through a maze and, you know, be rewarded when they do well and shocked when they don't do well. But the more times they're shocked, the more error prone they become, the more stressed they become. And if shocked enough times, initially all they wanted was out of the cage, in the end they stayed in the cage. When the cage was opened and they were allowed to go free, they didn't want to. They stayed huddled. They were scared. So that's, we see that with institutionalization. You know, we see this with people who become adapted to dysfunctional relationships, you know, abusive relationships that repeat over and over and over again, not because people want to be abused, but because they have adapted to it, so they don't know how not to be abused. You know, how not to be in an abusive dynamic, how not to find unsafe people. They have broken radars. You know, and so again, you know, people who have been in prison long enough or have been in prison enough times, some will tell you it is preferable. You know, it's so much easier. The world's too big, too many choices. You know, I can't get a job anyway. You know, things like that. You know, I know guys that have been to war again and again and again, and they say war is scary and it's rough and it's stressful and everything, but it's become all they know, and they enlist for tour after tour after tour. And so, and I've also heard some military people say that war is fun, and I puzzle at that, but you know, it's a lot of adrenaline. It's a lot of, you know, a powerful physiological neurological and emotional response that people, I think, can become somewhat addicted to or adapted to, because safe and civilian life is often slow and hard to, to readapt to. We're pretty good at making soldiers. We're not pretty good at, not so good at helping them, return to safe civilian life. And that may be because of that long-term adaptation. So, but traumatic reenactment, that's where people keep relying on those old dysfunctional coping skills. Again, because it helped once. Violence solved the problem. And when the problems we solve with violence, the real necessary problems that are solved with violence, those were pretty big problems at the time. Somebody was trying to hurt us. And so if we were successful at defending ourselves, then again, violence, check mark, there's a psychological click happening in our brain. Ooh, that worked. And it felt powerful, over that helplessness. And so a lot of people reenact their trauma with those old dysfunctional coping skills. And again, reenact their trauma with new dysfunctional and abusive or codependent relationships because they haven't found a way to stop being injured. They haven't found a way to address their needs in a healthy way. But it does start with our thinking. It does start with our understanding. So that's why this whole discussion today has been about a cognitive challenge first, because we can get into the neuroelasticity, but unless somebody else is, pulling all the strings, we have to understand how. It's fun to just say neuroelasticity. Okay, so what I want to do now is, just explore, I threw a couple of them up there, of some of those common negative thoughts, that people have. And so what are some of those common negative thoughts that again, preserving people's confidentiality of sorts, of course, but what are some of the repetitive types of negative thoughts or cognitions or perceptions that you're hearing as clinicians? And I'll pause for a moment. But again, what's the one on there now? I won't do well?
I can't do well if circumstances are not just.
Was this the first one or the
Very first one.
Okay. So yeah, I've had a lot of people say, you know what? I didn't have my red hat, so I just can't, or whatever, or you have to have circumstances just so, or I won't do well. And so, I think that can be certainly a very unhelpful thought, because a lot of times we have to do with what we've got. And so, if we believe that we won't do well, that does something to us, So does anyone have any thoughts to share? If not, we'll go to the next one.
Okay, the next one is...
Bad luck.
Yeah, I don't really know. There's been times in my life where I think I've probably uttered this myself. Bad luck, or just my luck. Who hasn't? The constant. It is a human concept, whether it's a phenomenon or not. Luck. It is a human concept. So sometimes we use words that exist and concepts that exist. So
somebody said, "I'm cursed."
I'm cursed. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that one before. Something like that. Others. What do we do with that? And now, if somebody believes that they're cursed, if somebody believes that their luck is just bad, that sounds a lot like learned helplessness, and again, some of the problems that people will share with us when they list thing after thing after thing, I said, gosh, maybe you do have bad luck. Golly, no. But sometimes the belief in such systems or concepts does lend to a self-fulfilling prophecy and an acceptance, I believe, of a negative outcome. So I'm cursed.
Same. and the next one it's going to be a bad day.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So some people get up in the morning and they're just like, oh, I can just tell. You know, and gosh, I say the morning time is a time when our mood is particularly fragile. And so, you know, a couple of rough moments in the morning, and it can start to feel like, gosh, oh boy, what else is coming? There's a negative momentum started to be created here. So, so again, I throw these out there so we can start to, you know, do that thing that, you know, the neurologist was doing with the guy that had the monitors on. You know, what is a bad day? What's that mean? Is that essential? Is it imperative? Is there possibilities for something different? Huh. And so, and I'm trying to get people into recognizing their own something I call action-based neuroelasticity. And again, I'm going to find as many reasons and times to opportunities to say that, I think, today. I don't know. I'm just really enjoying it. But other thoughts to challenge, though. Okay. Well, again, we work with a lot of injured people. There's a lot of emotional contagion that goes along with this work. I mean, who among us hasn't treated severely mentally ill or severely emotionally disturbed human beings this week? Some in high volume, caseloads that are stacked up. And so, for one, I think there can be some clinical learned helplessness. And I think that we can start to take on a type of thinking that we're helping to kind of hoping to lead the charge against. And the reality is, I believe this, if we're not able to recognize some of these processes and make some of these challenges within ourselves, it will probably be harder for us to genuinely teach these skills. And plus, it'll just help us when systemic, environmental, and emotional contagion kind of start to bog us down. So I listed a few of some of those clinical. Yeah. Anybody ever feel like I'm just not helping anybody? Anyone ever felt like that? Yeah. Because I think a lot of times when we're overwhelmed by a tough case, it's right there in our face, it's fresh on our hippocampus, and so it causes us to sometimes not be as aware to remember when our efforts are more successful, the kids and patients that are doing better, the students that do respond to our teaching. You know, a lot of times I think as you know, we're puzzling over how to help people navigate their lives, how to address real human problems. I think it's easy to start to feeling as if, well, there's one answer here, and I'm, you know, either I'm not finding it or I found it and they're just not agreeing with it and applying the intervention, you know, as designed, you know. And so, and we can get hung up in that. Now, I guess there's maybe a few things in life where there's just one answer, you know, but there's a lot of gray, and there's a lot of different ways to get to many of those healthy outcomes. You know, a lot of different ways to live a life. Anybody ever take it hard as somebody who's there to help? So it's kind of, you feel some accountability, responsibility for how well they do or don't do. Yeah, you know, we're proud of our patients when they do great. But then also we can kind of, I don't know, it can cause us to question ourselves or feel like we're not good at our job or things like that. And so there are going to be very challenging cases. There is no such thing as a 100% success rate for any mental health clinician. That's not possible, not in human work. We'd have to get everybody in the whole system to cooperate and just do like we say, and then it'll all be great. I think sometimes we do have to remember that it's still their problem, and I don't want to disengage myself so much from that I don't care, that I'm callous. But again, their decisions don't affect us. Their outcomes in the long run really don't, they live a very separate life from us as their clinical person that they see in an office for once a week. So sometimes I have to remind myself, I go home, and and I think also part of being ethical clinicians is avoiding an attempt to guide people in any one certain direction other than safety, other than being healthy and appropriate for themselves and certainly for the kids. But do you guys have any of those clinical? I really would like to hear that I'm not the only clinician that feels discouraged sometimes in this work.
Quit the profession entirely and do something else?
Is that a thought? Or are you telling me what to do?
No, that.
She's telling me to get out of the profession and do something else.
No.
Okay.
That's just a thought I have thunk before.
She thunk it.
Thunk that thought. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just go teach or something like that.
Yeah. All right. So So certainly, I think discouragement can lead us to consider, or at least have that thought every now and then.
Yeah.
But what is a perception or a thought about your work that may need to be challenged sometimes? I mean, if you have any, like I said, you guys may be such exemplary clinicians that y'all never have a negative thought about a patient ever. Like these parents just suck and they don't even care about their kids and stuff like that. But if you do, like I said, I'd love to hear from you. If not, we'll continue to move forward.
Okay.
So, perception equals reality. And so, while we don't want to tell people to just think more positively, sometimes we do have to help people learn to adjust their expectation or perception. And so, because certainly what we perceive or expect to be about a situation is going to affect and produce a cognitive and emotional response. It's going to affect how we engage the situation. But I think what's important here to remember is that we, once we have some understanding of these processes, it does empower us. It does give us a lot of choice. So we have a special capacity, with our more complex range of emotions, as human beings, we have the ability to affect our own mood. Because again, the thought does lead to the feeling, and the feeling does lead to the action. So if I think, gosh, today it's just going to be a bad day, I can tell. Well, that's a thought. That's an assessment of the situation, and of course that cognitively is going to lead to, of course, who wants to think that it's going to be a bad day? If that's true, then who's going to feel very good about that? That's going to lead us to feel some despair or distress or frustration, and certainly hopelessness even about our day. And if we think it's going to be bad and then we feel that it's going to be bad, that's certainly going to affect our efforts and then the outcomes. And so, again, while we don't want to just tell people to think more positively, we want to teach people to climb into that place where they can come up with a better plan, where it could, it might still be a bad day. But we want to help people recognize their cognitive behavioral role in that, and that they do have some power and that they do have some choice. And again, we don't have to be neurologists or brain scientists to help people get a handle on the connection between thought, feeling, and action. you know. And so when people do start to, say I'm cursed or whatever, now we'll probably need to check their emotional range. I think that this is where, all right, so let's identify your feelings. It sounds like you feel, one of those, traditional therapeutic skills. Now let's rate that. Now if we're really up there with, then maybe coping is necessary first. Now, all right, now what does it mean to be cursed? I mean, do people really, like magic spells and stuff like that? What do you mean? Well, no, that's not really what I mean. But it just seems like, well, it does seem like that. You've had a lot of tough things happen to you. Somebody had shared that they sleep, sometimes wake up at night or lose sleep worrying if they said the right thing. And so, see, the thing is, if your brain, your heart, we're there and we're invested in that process. And so I think as human beings, if we expect yourself to never say a wrong thing, then we're doomed. Sometimes we'll be human as clinicians, but there isn't a best or right thing usually to say, and concerning over that can cause us to, keep ourselves up at night worrying about what we did or didn't. So, thank you for sharing that. So again, as we help people become they're better expert for self. I like that. So as we help people, explore themselves and how they can achieve their own recovery, because we don't want to fix them so they can feel like some expert did it or some expert let them down so there's a savior or a scapegoat. But no, what we want to do is help them recognize on their timeline, all right, here's that injury or those series of injuries. Here's where we started to develop negative ways of coping. Here's where we started to pick up on some bad habits. Here's where we started engaging in similar expression or coping like had been demonstrated for us. And so when we can help people recognize, the kind of when, where, why, how, so that's when we can start to help them recognize and prepare for their tail wags. And so that's one of the things too. I feel like when we've learned a lot of injuries and injured ways of being in the world, we can start to want to just tear the whole house down. And I feel like, I think, it's really important to remember that people have some great resilience and some positive strengths, and a lot of that has helped them get to, to still be okay, to be upright in the world. And so we want to help people. Part of Identify, Challenge, and Change is being selective, because there are going to be influences and instincts that we continue to embrace and accept, and then we want to choose the learning that wasn't of our choosing. And one of the things, we see a lot of regression in our society, things like racism and different things coming back. Racism, it was learned from someone who was learned from someone who learned from somebody, and so, but there's all kinds of norms that are passed from generation to generation in a term that I would call pre-logic. When brains are just sucking up whatever data is there, when it's not necessarily, we're taking in what's best and rational and logical. No, we do a lot based on what's familiar. So how different races of people treat each other, how men and women are supposed to treat each other, how boys and girls are supposed to treat each other, these things are often ingrained within us at a pretty early age, but we can also recognize too, some of that doesn't make any sense. Now, I learned from these people, and they taught me that, XYZ dysfunction, but I can choose to reject that data, and I can catch myself, thinking and feeling that way and say, no, I identify, I challenge, and I change that. And so but it also helps us embrace the good learning, the healthy and more functional ways of being in the world that we have learned. You know, Oklahoma is a very injured state, but I also think within that we're a very resilient people. And I've often cited, you know, getting to be a part of certain different disaster reliefs at different times. You know, I can vouch for when other places in the country have terrorism or tornadoes or weather or trauma like they've never seen before, they call people like us. Because Oklahomans know pain and we know resilience. So we're a strong people, so we've got to embrace that, you know, as a people, but also be willing, because our pride sometimes causes us to be unwilling to consider change when it's necessary for our kids and for our families, for our very own health. You know, I mean, just thinking about us being #1 in ACEs, you know, going back to ACEs and what they were actually studying initially, it was weight problems. Oklahoma's #1 in heart disease death. You know, and those kind of problems. So eating injured is a big problem. You know, substance abuse is a big problem in Oklahoma. And again, the way we're raising our kids. You know, so again, you guys know that I'm not preaching at you, but anyway, power thoughts are something that again I didn't invent. There's also some of it may be known as positive self-talk. AKA, and so, but this again is, we're going hard with our access for that cerebral cortex. You know, we're assessing this to be positive. You know, and sometimes we may be forcing it a little bit. Sometimes we may not feel like it's going to be a good day, and a power thought may be necessary. You know, a power thought is like, you know what, this is still possible. I can do this. And so I want to hear your power thoughts, because Lord knows we work within emotional contagion and in systems that can, you know, burn us out and wear us out, and work that can, you know, cause us to be fatigued of our compassion. So what are the things you do to choose that cerebral cortex access, to get yourself pumped up, to be the thought that leads to the feeling that leads to the action that kicks the butt? I like that. So please share with me your power thoughts, because I'm going to share with you some of mine. What are some of mine, Travis? Tell me my thoughts.
I can do this, I can help it.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things, I can do this, I can help it. You know, one of the worst things that you can ever get to believe is, I can't help it. I can't help it. You hear that all the time. I can't help it. It's just the way it is. And so, and there may be legitimate times where I can't not help it. But can't is one of the worst words in our language. You know, I'd rather kids use swear words than can't words. Because can't is a thought, and it leads to a feeling, and it leads to an action. And so, you know, old Ford said, whether a person believes he can do a thing or believes he can't do a thing, he's right. And so, so we've got to, you know, certainly help people challenge the can'ts. And so, and it, you know, and it does feel some power to say, I got this. I got this. I can do this. Because again, we know that the world will frustrate and discourage us. It will upset us. It will scare us and make us nervous and worried. So what we've got to do is push back on that. We've got to say, no, I'm going to pump myself up. I'm going to encourage myself. I'm going to tell myself that I'm going to own what's good about me. You know, teaching people to take pride in what they do. You know, to notice the good things that they do. You know, those are skills. You know, that really, you know, it really does a lot for people. So, what's the name of this slide again? I want to make sure I'm.
Power thoughts.
Yeah. So is anyone sharing their raw thoughts?
Not yet.
Nobody's sharing power thoughts. All right. We're assuming everyone is awake and not just like, off doing the dishes. But
Yeah, some people have their cameras on.
okay, they're like nodding, like, of course we're here. How dare you? No, I can't see that. So, but you guys surely do have power thoughts. And I hope that if you're not at least sharing yours, that you are, helping people find their power thoughts. And that takes me to the next slide. I used this one and another one, but I think we can help people, with developing missions and mantras and mottos, things that we can kind of cling to that give us strength and help us remember. Because they do this. I mean, basic psychology, they use these concepts in sales all the time to sell us crap we don't need. And so, of course, a slogan is a brief, often striking and memorable statement to advertise, to sell us something. But we can use that psychological conceptualization to, instill messages of hope, of resilience, of healing. What does Nike tell you to do? What's Nike say? They say to just do it, and people with the milk mustache, their slogan is 2 words and it's a question. Got milk. So again, these things help us want to purchase a product or remember a product or whatever. And so I think we can help people dig deep and write their own mission statements. I can do this. I got this. I've done it before. I'll do it again. Things like that. Because if we understand the adaptations of an injured environment or repeated trauma, we've got to get them in the habit of kind of summoning their positivity. Because not just because everything's going to be positive by thinking positive thoughts. It's about granting that access to the cerebral cortex, and better thoughts can lead us to better feelings and better outcomes that are genuine. So let's keep going.
Someone said I remind myself I have no control of another person's life. I can only control my own thoughts and behavior.
Absolutely. It helps. We sometimes think we can fix or change somebody else, and we really only have control over ourselves. But one of the things that we find is a better understanding of just what you said right there. It often allows us to have a better influence, because we can't make anyone do anything, but we can influence them. And sometimes it's what we say and what we don't say and how we say that often finds that better influence. But accepting that some things are not going to be. What is it you always say? Get should out of your mouth. Martina's always telling me to not say should.
She went to the restroom.
Oh, okay. So we're talking about her in the restroom. She'll be thrilled. But no, but the thing is, should is an expectation, and people often do get caught up in a belief in how things ought to be, when in reality that is setting up for some frustration, because we really still do have to address what is, not what should be or what we hope or wish was. So action-based neuroelasticity. This is about understanding that what we do has an influence over us, and so one of the things that I talk about with ICC is, when we do a new skill or a new strategy, it's not automatically a skill, and so it does require a lot of repetition. But we can actually see that over time, if we repeat a new pattern of behavior, and if we do that for sometimes as little as 21 days in a row, if we cope differently, if we express differently, if we eat differently, if we do things differently, then it is possible that over time we can start to forge new neural pathways. And that's based on what we do. And so while we may not be happy with the injuries, we can't rewind and erase trauma, but we do have some say about how things go moving forward, and that's power. Yeah. So yeah, and this is what I've been telling you, but brains grow pretty unconsciously. But again, we're the only creature that thinks about thinking that we are aware of. You know, we reflect on our own feelings, our own triggers, our own experiences and memories, you know, our interactions with other people. And so that does, you know, allow us to be more calculated, and it allows us to have power. So yeah, I think, but it is based on what we do, because, yeah. Well, what I like about self-care empowerment is, well, I think that this is some of the easiest change to achieve. Well, we can help them achieve this if we can get them motivated to improve on self-care. Some need a little bit of work with this, and some need a lot. But we need to help people understand that the ingredients to life are essential. You can't just completely neglect nutritional or hydration needs, sleep needs, exercise needs, recreational needs, and expect that the outcome is going to be anything positive. Physically and emotionally, a lot of those problems are indicating an unmet need. And so, but what I really like about getting people pumped up about both self-care and coping in healthy ways is what it does for them. Because when people come back to you after they've implemented new strategies, after they've really started taking better care of themselves when they haven't been, when they really start coping and achieving their own relief, they come back and they're so proud. You know, they're just like, I feel so much better, and I did it myself. And that's, that's the whole, kind of teach a man to fish instead of giving him just giving him something to eat, or a man or a woman, or person. Again, but we need to help people understand that, again, so if we don't have certain nutrition in us, certain nutrients, it's going to lend to depression in particular. We need our greens and our leafy stuff, and of course, the 4 food group stuff, because these were things we learned in elementary school, and then, and I think maybe because we learned it in elementary school, that it was like, okay, well, that's just kid stuff. Got to make sure the kids get their veggies or whatever. It's for everybody. And it literally will lend to more depression without some of the key nutrients. And hydration is important for so many different things. Sleep, we know that trauma causes sleep to be harder. More heartbeats per minute, more rapid and shallow breathing. The body is literally more physically worked up even in the resting state based on trauma and related diagnoses. And so, but knowing that can allow us to take some steps to manage our sleep hygiene, to set up certain routines, to limit distractions. Sometimes healthy sleep aids may be appropriate. And so a lot of times white noise, fans, making sure that the environment is conducive for sleep, and sometimes people, depending on what their home environment is and what the space is like in their home, that does create some challenges. So I don't want to just give people advice that they just sleep better when they share a bedroom with 4 other people or something, but finding ways to creatively problem solve for issues such as that. Exercise is so absolutely key, and this is a part of a big transformation here. It's both important for self-care as well as coping, because everybody needs exercise, but our jobs have us doing a lot less physical type of work than we used to typically. Most of us are not swinging hammers or digging ditches or building houses or hunting and defending, and we're not doing those things, swinging and chopping. And so our body requires a physical outlet to maintain general functioning, to keep our bones and our muscles and everything strong, but also to manage stress responses, because the stress response supplies fight or flight, additional cortisol and adrenaline, an active and reactive nervous system that's ready to fight, ready to run, ready to react without thinking. And so in this day and age, fight or flight is not usually as appropriate to fight or run away when you're stressed out, even if you feel like it. And so what we've got to do is find an energy equivalent and help people understand. And I tell patients, if you don't have get enough good healthy food and water, if you don't get enough sleep, you don't get enough exercise, therapy's only going to help you a little bit. If you're not at least addressing those in basic ways, you won't get as well as you hope to. But post-traumatic stress or chronic stress often involves that third layer of energy that I've often talked about. Everybody eats food, and that's fuel. And then stress provides an additional layer of energy at times, but then post-traumatic stress provides additional cortisol and adrenaline and a very active nervous system. So without exercise, recovery is just really not possible at all. So, and people don't want to hear that. I didn't invent that knowledge, but it's absolute. And of course, we've got to help people plan some recreation and different things. But again, I just say, to you once more, isn't it great, when we can get people pumped up about their own self-care? I can't tell people they should or shouldn't take medications, but when people start to address some of their key physical needs first, some of those medications might be less necessary, and they can take that up with their doctor. And sometimes they do. Sometimes they do when they learn to address some of their key actual needs. So let's keep going. People have a couple of really key needs, especially when in pain, and relief is paramount. And so we want to help people recognize, this is about making coping real. We've got to really practice people's coping skills with them, help them rehearse them in a time when they're not stressed out or emotional, because then when we're stressed out and emotional, we can't remember or plan very well. So that's when we've got to have some neurological seed already planted. Some beginning of a skill at least started, so we can begin to cope effectively. There's a last bullet on here. Yeah, this is relief learned, earned, achieved. Just like with self-care. When we can help them recognize it was the maladaptive coping that wasn't the initial problem, but that kept us sick. When we can replace those negative strategies over and over and over again, we forge new neural pathways. We can give ourselves some new instincts where it used to feel like a cigarette. Now, for our cigarette smokers that have quit, I'm sorry for triggering you. But again, occasionally you might still crave one, but not as often, not as intensely, usually. That's because that old neurological development and physiological development in your body has started to deteriorate. It's given way to new development. You put some new skills on top of it in that brain. And so again, but this is about relief, and it's about returning to functionality. We got to remind people that we're not good at the things we want to be good at if we don't take steps to help ourselves feel better. And again, that's transformation. When we stop doing the injured behaviors that keep us sick and stuck, and that's when we can really start. And when we repeat new skills, that's new development in the brain. And so we need to help people recognize that their emotions have a reason. And I just remind people that anger is not bad or wrong. Fear is not, we need these unpleasant feeling emotions. Unpleasant emotions keep us alive. Fear helps us react quickly and instinctively, and anger also provides us with additional strength and energy, kind of like the fear and stress response. But it also provides with a painkiller and a fear inhibitor. When we're really mad, we don't care about what's going to happen. you know, in that moment, or not as much. Because again, limbic activity has gotten big, and so cerebral activity is less accessible to us, you know. And so now there is a part of that cortex up there that worries about, hey, maybe this might not be such a good idea, but we don't have as much access to that part. And so so again, yeah. What slide is this again?
Power of anger.
Yeah, the power of anger. So again, I work with lots of kids, and I like superheroes. So I talk about those superhuman powers of anger and fear. But we can channel these. You know, we can use our superpowers for good. We've certainly got to help kids recognize. This is the next one about not explosive coping.
Yeah.
Okay. So again. They used to teach kids to whack dummies and hit punching bags, you know, bite a pillow when they're angry. And I certainly would rather the dummy, the pillow, the mattress or whatever, rather than the person. But practicing this as a therapeutic skill, well, it's been refuted by much evidence. Cathartic type of therapy, or whatever they call it, and so we shouldn't do it because again it does hardwire neurologically or reinforce a perhaps already established neurological connection between anger is the emotional capacity and the action that goes with, that's associated with it. What you do when you're mad is this. And it becomes associated and connected neurologically, and so it's not often a conscious or rational. Oh yeah, you know what? I'm going to do this because it's the thing to do. You know, it becomes the connection, and so we do need physical outlets. But I tell people to try not to go just run out to the bag every time they're particularly upset. Now, having regular physical outlets to go hit a bag or go swing a tennis racket or go tee off at the golf range, or you know, to do things to get that run in, because we do have a need to exert some of this energy. But again, you know, for the therapists and teachers that do want to, you know, say, all right, you know, let's practice your dummy whacking. We better have something safe to hit every time anger comes, because what we've done is taught, again, reinforced, practiced that connection, and again, the latest stuff does not support. So one of the things that I think we have to do, you know, I feel like most people, I'm not a fixer. We're not here to repair broken lives. We don't have the ability to do that. And again, if we could fix everybody, you know, they'd keep coming back for us to, you know, fixing. So we want to help people understand their injuries and what is common to the injury of trauma, so maybe they can forgive themselves for being injured and doing what injured people do. Because of the shame and the stigma that's come along with mental health treatment, with the judgment and the criticism and punishment that's come for their injured behaviors. You know, so I think part of changing brain is improving self-esteem, self-acceptance, self-worth, and then all of the possibilities. And so one of the things that I talk about a little bit is music and treatment, and I've got a whole presentation on that, and it's not as fun online. I'm just going to hurt my own advertising right now. The one in person when we do it live is so much fun. But anyway, but there's a reason, you know, that you can remember you know, certain commercials and certain songs and certain jingles, you know. They're associating one form of data with another. And when data rides together, it gets through our neural pathways somehow easier. It's like that Trojan horse. You know, they got in the gate with the Trojan horse. you know. And so because sometimes boring information just, you know, it just flies. But when we put it with a song or with a music, you know, at our music presentation, I played popular soundtrack themes from different movies, and people were able to, oh, that's Indiana Jones, that's Star Wars, that's this and that. And so what had happened was an experience watching a movie had been connected to data, auditory data. And so with that, you know, well, they're achieving some learning.
Right.
And then we're achieving some healing. So I'm getting a little tongue-tied here. Sorry about that. And so, but also, one of the things that I think helping people with, I don't know, we couple other types of data with emotion. Because when you feel something with a certain part of information, you remember it. And so we're finding these larger vehicles of emotion with forgiving themselves and power thoughts. You know, we're finding these musical and emotional vessels to go through. And on the next slide, I'll just tell you guys very briefly, you know, Dr. Perry and others can tell you a lot more about this, but you know, trauma does cause disconnectivity among the different components of the brain. The hippocampus is not as well connected with the cerebral cortex, and then to the regulation of sensation and movement in the body. And so, but we can also see that we can look, listen, think and remember, and coordinate our movements by activities involving music and movement. And that, what it does is it provides healing stimulation to the traumatized brain and body. And so, because when we have to use our eyes and ears and remembering together for notes or words or lyrics, and then when we coordinate that into gross and fine motor functions in our body, you know, and feeling the ground for dancing and for manipulating the instrument or hitting the drum, you know, what we're doing is we're actually providing healing stimulation to the traumatized brain. We got a drumming program funded at the Children's Hospital with this research, and this is something, again, everybody's wanting to be that thing culturally competent, which is not really even possible. You know, you can be culturally humble, but I think we can incorporate things that indigenous people, people of African plains, people of our native groups right here in Oklahoma, have been using drumming and music and movement-based treatments for thousands of years. And it's about kind of returning to being human, because a lot of musical and these types of programs are treated as kind of hippie, you know, frou-frou stuff or whatever. But now we've got neuroscience from the guy working with Oprah, who says, yes, this is essential. And the earlier the better. Repetitive, you know, stem cell related activating activities. It's providing healing stimulation to the traumatized brain. And so if we're talking about brain change today, music and movement is a big way that we can do that, and we can activate that change. So, so anyway, I can tell you guys more about that another day. So, words are transformative. You know, we think, you know, we have an inner monologue, but when you remember something, it has videos. You know, kind of, I would say it's kind of these visual and audio files, olfactory files, things that smell and feel a certain way, the textures, you know, so we remember in those types of data files. That's how our memories are stored. And again, cognitive and emotional processes, those are electrical and chemical processes. Again, none of that's words. But something happens. Humans, we develop this more complex form of language. And so we put words to our feelings. And something happens with that. You know, we gain some perspective. You know, again, for one, as we've done this, we recognize that when our electrical impulses and our active limbic system is really going crazy, using words is one way that's proven to help calm our nervous system and our limbic system, to reduce our strong emotional responses so we can actually do more thinking and planning. and also, so it's achieving some relief, but it's also helping us understand our own experiences. It's giving us some mastery of our own personal data. So if you think about it, you have information stored within your brain. Now, if there's a story that you've never told someone before, then that information has not been put into words yet. And to do so, those visual, audio, olfactory, and sensory files have to move. Data is moving to the part of your brain that knows words, and you're watching it happen. And so you're learning from your own story very oftentimes. And so this is why, if you've ever told someone something that happened and then you said, wow, I didn't ever realize, you realize something as you're telling, it's because you're putting it into words. And so words can take some of our power back when these overwhelming traumatic experiences have made it hard to put those data files into words. Now, it's a misnomer that all trauma must be processed letter by letter and smell by smell. In fact, studies of things like critical debriefing types of interventions where they made people process when they didn't necessarily feel the need to, they were re-traumatizing people. Symptoms will tell us what we need to process. So, but anyway, we'll keep going. So one of the things that we want to help people do, again, when we're doing ICC, it's about our coping, but it's also about our communication skills. Our heart and our mind are our most powerful human tools, and without our communication skills, we're not able to really reach out and connect with others. And so humans have two needs when they're struggling: relief and somebody to care and support. Somebody to connect with or validate, and so, and when we express injured, we oftentimes push a lot of the people away that we need. And so now, of course, we want to inform the supporters to stay the course, to not give up on folks and to not do it back when they're injured with us. But that takes a lot of practice, a lot of skill, a lot of planning, knowing that we're about to go interact with an injured person that might be volatile. We want to love those people anyway in the best ways that we can. But when we can help people identify the barriers and blockers, the things that just don't work, and again, to recognize that some of those are some of their tail wags, and to plan for those, that doesn't work. If we know that doesn't work, we can plant that seed. Now, if it's a bad habit to yell or to do whatever, it's a barrier or a blocker to positive communication, that doesn't go away quickly and easily. But we can start to help them catch when they do that, because when we make people feel defensive or reactive, we've lost them. And so, and when people have a need, very often it's their communication that's going to help them secure that need, that support, that resource. And so, and of course, we want to teach people what does work better, and about how much of communication is nonverbal. And so that's important for the clinician and just for the human in general, especially for us clinicians, though, in a hypersensitive population that could react to the sigh or a shifting of our body, or so anyway, thinking about communication. And when we teach new skills, and when people start to meet some of their own needs in better ways, again, over time, we're forging new development in the brain, and also a lot of confidence too. Less regret. So, but planning for the rest, we've got to developing the rest. We can't rewind and erase trauma, and trauma does often overdevelop our limbic system and nervous system. So some reactivity may persist. Some anxiety and depression may be things that we manage throughout life, but we don't let beat us. And so, but while we can't rewind and erase the development of our limbic system, and while some other systems may have lagged in their development, some of them do possess potential to keep growing and developing and connecting with the rest. And so understanding, now we have to also recognize that there are those risks for addiction, and excessive avoidant mechanisms, because we have a great need for relief and distraction, but we could want to stay in that place too much. But this is about planning real joy and finding what matters to us. You know, this is about, I think, kind of exploring some of our own potential. What's the last bullet on there? Yeah, so we're going to, you know, target things that help us feel good, that help us find purpose, that, you know, are truly fulfilling, you know. Yeah, unification of our mind and body, like with music and movement. You know, there's a reason when people come out of church and they've been singing and dancing, if that's what they do at your church, or you come out of the music hall where you've been getting down, shaking it, you know, or, you know, rock concert, you know, or, you know, after you've been playing a ball game and everyone's been running around, you know, we've been coordinating these things. These were social and emotional events, but we were unifying our mind and body when we were thinking and listening, and then, you know, uniting with other people. So we want to engage in things that, you know, unify our mind and our body, but also us with our families and our communities, and maybe our spiritual world. You know, so whatever, you know, is fulfillment to you, we've got to help people plan for those things. And that brings me to one of our last slides. One of the things that we know is having a traumatic life can cause you to have to live in survival mode. But one of the things that, you know, I just talked with a patient the other day who's planning better for the future and starting to recognize that she's doing so, and, you know, high fives to her, really proud of her. But the thing is, we can start to target the future. We can start to recognize that, you know, well, our survival mode, these are strengths very often, but strengths that can be stretched for more long-term survival and to be applied in better and more proactive ways. And so, but we can start to target the discharge in the beginning of our treatment, but we can start to target the future, you know, having people practice with their ability for planning. You know, and starting to make some priority for future orientation. Understanding our processes, and this is a, you know, a cognitive behavioral challenge to keep an eye on the prize. You know, this is about being goal-oriented. What was that?
Sorry, that was me.
Oh, okay. It's about, you know, it's about being goal-oriented. And so anyway, the 4 P's is next?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we're talking about change, you know, once we've overcome basic survival mode, once we're safe and we're managing emotions, once we've dealt with losses and we're starting to be able to make plans in the future, again, those are indicators for recovery. And so, but also beyond that, once our limbic system is quiet more often, and we're developing in more complex ways, we can start to, you know, use potential. We can start to explore potential, because everyone has potential, and when we're injured, we're not able to access as much of that, not able to develop as much of it. And so many people are walking around with these untapped gifts and abilities. I think, again, everybody's the Michael Jordan of something, but they didn't get to practice hard enough, or didn't get to believe in themselves enough and explore those gifts. So we can help people transform idle, you know, a dysfunction to having something to show for their time and their energy and their efforts, and to be able to be productive. This is called Jeremy's 4 P's: potential, productivity, pride, and purpose. You know, teaching people that actually taking time to notice when you do a good thing, to pat yourself on the back. This is important for people who have not had a lot of good praise and emotional support. This is for people who, again, maybe didn't get a lot of love and haven't, you know, learn to love themselves, but still have some potential to be able to do so. And again, we know that when we take time to practice optimism, it does give greater access to our cortex. And again, to people with a sense of purpose, we can transform our pain into, you know, understanding or perspective, and we can, you know, make it mean something. What did I say about purpose? Having a sense of purpose, you know, it gets us through hard times. You know, and studies show it extends our life, our longevity, and it improves our response to stress. It gives us something to focus on, a light in the dark. And again, these are more complex emotional needs towards fulfillment. you know, and living a happier, more satisfied and healthy life. But again, studies show extends the longevity of life. So thank you if you have bared with us to the extended time end. Transformations, you know, I encourage you to look up more information on neuroelasticity, because I had to say it one more time. But
Sounds smart.
yeah, but again, when we can help people forgive themselves for being injured, we improve, change how they feel about themselves. When we can help people replace injured coping, again, this is kind of a review, but then they're going to, you know, start to feel better in healthier and safer ways, and they're going to be able to achieve that on their own. And they're going to get out of some of those injured patterns. Again, when we can teach people to express their feelings in a more planned and practiced way, to understand how they look and sound matters a lot. And so they're going to be able to connect with their friends and their families. They're going to be able to hold their jobs, and they're going to be able to connect with necessary supports as needed. And so, you know, I think that we have to transform perceptions of illness and disability, you know, because, well, disability, if you know, that's a state of mind. I can't drive a car. I'm vision impaired. I can't read you my PowerPoints, and I stumble over them sometimes. Thanks for bearing with me. But see, the thing is, I don't feel disabled. I'm able to work, hold a job, parent my child, maintain a household, and make a difference. And so, but if I believed that I couldn't, then I wouldn't. And so I have a disability. I am not disabled. And so what we've got to help people recognize is if they have a disability, then it's an obstacle, not an excuse. That we can help people, you know, turn a disability into ability. And see, one of the things is I've had lots of trauma. I've had, you know, a disability and different things, but I also consider myself to be strong and good. And so one of the things that we can recognize is that when life gives us heavy weights, if we can find a way to keep lifting, we get big muscles. And helping people recognize that. That, you know, I'm not going to tell people everything that happens to you is, you know, blessing in disguise, and everything happens for a reason, and that which doesn't kill us only make us stronger. I hate that crap. I'm not going to do it. But I do want people to recognize that, you know, our obstacles are just those. We've all got obstacles, but we don't give up, you know, because that's my saying anyway. Okay. Obstacles, and the last is about life, because you know a lot of times when we're helping people actually achieve positive outcomes, things they didn't think were possible. You know, anytime you ever did something you didn't think you could, did it ever make you think, gosh, what else? Wonder what else I can do now that maybe I didn't think I could. And that's where we want to get people thinking, a new way of confidence, a new view. You know, a new view for recovery. So thank you guys so much for participating and supporting our mission, for helping send us out to police departments and schools, for getting CEUs from us. And again, anyone that doesn't need a certificate can watch our videos for free. So if any of this is helpful to anyone that you think, please share our resource, because as I like to say, we're here to make a difference, not a dollar, and we thank you for helping us do that. Questions, comments? God bless.